Thank you very much for your introduction. I'm very happy to see you all, and I'm very glad to see 52 people came today to listen to the talk. I hope we will have a good discussion afterwards. And I would like to ask you, Sandeep, thank you so much for inviting me today. And would you be able to share my slides now? Wonderful. Great, perfect. I can see it now. Thank you so much. Today the talk is about the art of collaboration, because looking at the fourth industrial revolution and the changes in the industrial environment, I'm arguing here that we have to look at the role of positive psychology and transforming organization on the way to the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you. Next slide, please. When we are looking at the next slide, I took a quote from a saxophonist, Steve Lacy from the US, and he said it is in collaboration that the nature of art is revealed. So in this talk today, we are speaking about art, but also about collaboration and positive psychology and how it can help us to look at organizations in the meantime. Next slide, please. Okay, the art of collaboration. It is quite an interesting thing that the Chinese Admiral Zhang He has already spoken about the art of collaboration long ago in the 14th century. And he said that the principle of collaboration is actually to know your collaborator and to know yourself. And this principle is still valid in today's world. However, I'm arguing today that we have to look a bit deeper into this and that we have to expand it, because of the growing importance of the rapid changes of the fourth industrial revolution and the different kind of workplaces we are living in today. Next slide, please. Just up front, to look at the fourth industrial revolution and collaboration and art. What does it actually mean? Why are we talking about the art of collaboration? We are talking about the art of collaboration because we need to look at the expression and application of human creativity, of creative skills and imagination when we are moving into the fourth industrial revolution. We will see that we will have to have a creative activity going on. And this is why we talk about the art of collaboration. What does collaboration mean? When we are looking at the definition, the collaboration is an action of working with someone to produce or create something. Or it is also the cooperation with an enemy. So in today's very competitive global environment, we always have to look at the collaborator, not only as an enemy or a competitor, but as a collaborator. Next slide, please. And when we are now talking about the fourth industrial revolution, a lot of people always ask me, what is it actually? So the fourth industrial revolution is a movement. It is actually a movement. We have a lot of definitions about it. And one is that the fourth industrial revolution is a way of describing the blurring of boundaries between the physical world, between the digital one, the biological one. And it always includes rapid changes, and it is mediated by technology or even by smart technology. It also includes, according to Schwab, a newly occurring lifestyle and different kind of lifestyle that we haven't seen before. They are digitalized and they often take into account automation and also robotics, the Internet of Things, and other new nanotechnologies that we are looking at. So most of the research we are seeing today on the fourth industrial revolution is about technological advantages. But my talk today shouldn't be only about this. It is also about the role of positive psychology and industrial and organizational psychology. Next slide, please. So I told you about the Admiral in the beginning. And I said that it's not only about intra and interpersonal knowledge that we have to apply in these times of changes, but we have to really look at the complex situation and do that in a critical way, with critical thinking and combined with emotional and behavioral aspects. It's not enough just to look at the cognitive aspects anymore. So what the art of collaboration suggests for the 21st century is that we have to have expanded perspectives, that we use systemic approaches, and that we have to have a theoretical foundation also for industrial and organizational psychologists that might even be missing at the moment still when we are looking at how to deal with the fourth industrial revolution with regard to employees and also organizations. And I'll explain to you the two waves of positive psychology to you a bit later. Next slide, please. So the aim of this little presentation is today to really reflect on the different key factors. I would like to share 3 different research examples for you, which have got an application in international organizations, in telecommunication, engineering, and a chocolate factory with regard to the fourth industrial revolution. Come to some conclusions, recommendations, and I hope we can have a reflective and critical discussion afterwards. Next slide, please. So when we are looking at the context of the discourse, we can see that a lot of organizations now put a healthy, a non-toxic, and a digitalized work environment up front. And especially in the COVID times where we are all, or a lot of us in the world are working from home, and we are living in this digitalized world, we have really to look after our health and mental well-being. A lot about the fourth industrial revolution context is about stress reduction, because we've seen a lot of stress increases in these times of rapid changes, and a lot of people don't have the resources or the resilience to deal with it. We need transcultural approaches to really foster development on a global level and to a greater good of humankind. And we have to take the 4 workspaces really into consideration and the new challenges that are occurring on all levels, not only on technological levels. On the next slide, you can see that Schwab, and he's one of the main drivers of the fourth industrial revolution, originally from Germany, he has actually said that we need to not only look at the technology, but we have to look at our identities and at the question, who are we with the new technologies and the use of it? And how do we relate to each other? We have to take the change not at a linear pace into account, but rather at an exponential. And we have to look at the digital technologies and the workspaces and what it does to us when we are working through the mediation of technology like we are doing now. We can see all over the world that the fourth industrial revolution is increasing the inequalities in the world. We can see that a lot of people with low skills are suffering because of automatization, that there's a lot of pay work that is low pay, that there are very high skills acquired to deal and to drive the fourth industrial revolution. And these jobs and employment possibilities come with a high pay. So we've got a huge gap between the low and the high pay. And we can see, due to these inequalities, we see that conflicts are arising and that new intervention are actually needed in organizations. And I'll share some examples with you just now. First of all, we need to see on the next slide that there is, first of all, an impact on the human capabilities, and we have to look at compassion and also cooperation. We have to look at an integration of cognitive, affective, and behavioral levels. We have to look at the meaningful conversation when we are looking at the fourth industrial revolution, and what meaning do we actually want to create with our jobs within the economic world and our lifestyles. And we have to have a discussion about it and a conversation. We have to look at the self-organization and how people really manage to self-organize themselves in cooperations globally. And we have to take global power shifts and control issues into consideration when we are looking at organizations. So it is all about the optimal functioning from a positive psychology perspective and a positive organizational psychology perspective. And this is why in organizations, the question for resourcefulness, but also emotional intelligence and intercultural competence with regard to creativity and solution orientation are being fostered more and more. Next slide, please. On an intrapersonal level, we can see that knowledge, awareness, reflexivity is very important when we are working in digitalized and automated world. We can see that a lot of mindfulness needs to be created to stay healthy, that we have to deal with complex issues and use our critical thinking. And often we can see that the educational system is not that far to really foster that on a cognitive level. However, this will be part of the future education in IO psychology and management. On the emotional level, which is often forgotten, we have to find self-empathy and emotional intelligence and bring it far more into the context. And we have to develop digital action and communication on a behavioral level. And we have to bring our online and our offline identities together. And we can see in research that this is often a problem, that people create different identities online in comparison to their offline identities. However, we have to negotiate the skills to deal with these different parts of our identities, and this is part of the fourth industrial revolution. So we have to use a systemic approach and have to take into consideration the local, the regional, but also the global levels of cooperation. In the next slide, you can see the interpersonal connection that we have to build across human beings. We have to acknowledge the self, but also the other. If we don't acknowledge ourselves, we can't acknowledge the other. It's even more difficult, and this is what research tells us, when we are online in digitalized world and remote workplaces. However, we can also see that we need effective interrelationships, and a lot of individuals report that through technologized communication, they don't feel that emotional, or they say they can't really decode or code emotions online. However, we can also use our nonverbal clues to do that. So we need empathy and humanness and also spirituality when it comes to online communication and the fourth industrial revolution and the change of workplaces. On a behavioral level, we have to create a culture that is sharing and connecting, that is negotiating, and that enables us to manage conflicts even in remote workplaces and across the globe. So that is very important, and this kind of research is only in the beginning at the moment. On the next slide, you will see that we have to look at our systemic connections in collaboration with regard to our workspaces. It is very important to take the social and cultural knowledge into consideration. And when we are looking at the fourth industrial revolution research and practice at the moment, we can see that there is a split and a divide between the global north and the global south, and it has been critically discussed during the past years. However, we can see that most of the knowledge that is created on the 4IR and the definitions, what it should be, is created by Western countries in Europe and the US. However, we need to take the global south into consideration and really build a holistic fourth industrial revolution that might surely be different to the one that we are seeing at the moment. So this, taking into account the social cultural dimensions of communication, we have to be open to do it. We have to be critical to see where we are maybe misled at the moment and where we can change to the better and look at the positive, what is working well. On the next slide, we can see the strength and the weaknesses of the fourth industrial revolution and the art of collaboration. And we can see that no really strong theoretical foundation and background in industrial and organizational psychology has been built up to today when it comes to human interaction in the fourth industrial revolution. And this is what we are actually busy with at the moment. In the next two slides, I'm just explaining quickly to you, for those who are not familiar with a positive psychology, you will see in the next slide the first movement of positive psychology. And in the first movement of positive psychology, it was about optimal functioning in a workplace. It was about becoming human, having a focus on the positive always, and really looking at the resources, looking at the positive emotion, looking at the positive character of the employee, of the organization, and enabling institutions and positive relationships. You may know the so-called father of positive psychology, Seligman. Martin Seligman, he has just presented a new paper in 2019 on his 20 years of experience building this research area. Very interesting, and it's available online. Okay, and then we can see that positive psychology in all the research of the last 20 years, which really increased, we can see that positive psychology increases health in organization, and it builds intercultural competence, and it helps to look at the positive and stay healthy for a longer time or remain your health. Then in the second wave of positive psychology that has only been built up since the 2011, it has been argued that we cannot only look at the positive, because if we don't take the negative or the pain into consideration that we have to go through, maybe when we are at work, when we have conflict at work, also in remote workplaces, and even there even more, we have to really take 4 aspects into consideration. This is what PP20 is all about: to look at the virtues in organizations, the meaning that organizations want to create, the resilience for the employees, and the well-being. So really, to improve the life and of employees in organizations, PP20 actually looks at not only the organizational context, but at expanding it into the society and contributing to the broader society and also to humankind as such. In the next slide, I would now like to come to different examples from research I've been conducting during the last years and past years. And you will see that we are now looking at coming from the pain to the happiness, like in PP20. We are looking at the shadow aspects of the organization, and also at the light and how to integrate that. We are looking at virtues and also identity management and how to create resilience in 3 different examples. In the next slide, please. This is just a slide to introduce that we are coming to the case examples now. And I hope I can share some insights from my own experience. And I'm going to share, on the one hand, some theoretical knowledge from the research, and on the other hand, some consultancy knowledge, because I've been doing a lot of consultancy as well as an IO psychologist. So I'm trying to combine this and share it with you. In the next slide, please, you can see our first example. And the first example is about growing intersectionalities of culture, gender, and nationality in a collaboration of Chinese-African interaction. So in the next slide, this is my example 1, you will see that we define culture in a certain way, in a very broad way, actually. We looked at culture of Chinese in Chinese organizations, of Chinese employees and Tanzanian employees here. I'm just giving you a short, insight into this large research project that has been running over 6 years altogether in different African countries. And we wanted to find out, how do actually Chinese and African employees cooperate positively and well together? So it was a research called China and Africa, and we looked at the intercultural collaboration in this in different organizations. And we could see that it is not enough just to look at culture or gender, but that we have to really have an intersectional approach, taking in abilities, skills, and so on, and different aspects of collaboration. So in the next slide, I will share with you the topics that came up in this research. So it was a telecommunication company, and within the company it was shared that this company is really driving the 4th industrial revolution forward, and that they are trying to bring the 4th industrial revolution to Africa, not only to Tanzania, but I'm just sharing these results at the moment. So we could see there are lots of challenges in this organization when it came to strategy. How did they manage a strategy to implement it in an African country? About the employment interaction, about contracts, about knowledge sharing. And I want to look at knowledge sharing for a short moment with you, because we can see the challenges, and I will share the solutions or possible solutions. In the next slide, we can see how a Chinese employee spoke. And I'll read it to you in case somebody logged in without being able to see. We have an open e-learning platform which carries all types of knowledge and information you want, which is related to our work. There is all the information from different countries and project experiences or specific technology training material. We share it in one database and one platform. Any staff can use their ID and just log in the office platform. Chinese and local staff are very open in communication and they work together very closely. So for the Chinese employees in general, it was very important that information are online. They are shared globally in the whole company. They've got an intranet. There you can get your promotions and you can educate yourself further and train yourself further online without much of a face-to-face contact. So relationship was only built through the e-platform, through the intranet, and in close global cooperation. However, one of the aspects that were criticized from the other side, and we are going to this side just now, was that there was feedback only to get online, but not face-to-face. So on the next slide, you see the Tanzanian employee and what this Tanzanian employee said at the same time. They said, for example, support is there, but not 100%. You can be given a job. Someone can come and tell you, do this, but I have never done it and I do not know. They say, just learn from your friends. My supervisors don't have time to teach me. And they say, here, nobody can teach you. You have to teach yourself. If you don't know, then find the one who can. Look online. So we found that we don't have much support from the Chinese. So for the Tanzanian employees in general, looking at all of the interviews, face-to-face communication and learning was mainly important. And we could see that there is a huge gap between the Chinese and the Tanzanian employees in terms of looking positively at the e-learning, for example, or the e-communication, the intranet communication, and the feedback that one could only get online. One of the huge challenges was that most of the platforms were in Chinese and most of the Tanzanian counterparts didn't speak Chinese. That was also a problem with the contracts. However, looking at the positive aspects, what the Chinese organization tried to do was to really uplift the Tanzanian employees in terms of technological knowledge. In the next slide, we can see that knowledge sharing was very important and that there were a lot of negative emotions around that. And with our interventions, we tried to address the negative emotions, which were only indirectly communicated, and to really take them into consideration. We had a focus on positive relationship, really what works, because in the beginning, the talks were quite negative from all sides, but we could, in the long term, change the perspective. We could also manage to get a more balanced online-offline communication for all employees within the organization in Tanzania. And we could also look at the bigger picture and look at the social responsibility and how it could impact in the Tanzanian society, which made then a huge difference also for the Tanzanian counterparts. And it was also a very high virtue for the Chinese counterparts in terms of PP20 to invest in the Tanzanian society. So we could transform this organizational setting quite well. However, at the same time, we had to find out that the drivers of the fourth industrial revolution were not really in place because most of the conflicts that appeared would have been part of the third industrial revolution, like, for example, email conflicts, platform conflicts, things like that that didn't work out. And this actually, according to the definitions, as I've shown you before in the one slide, belongs still to the third industrial revolution. In the next slide, I'm coming to a different example, and maybe we can discuss these examples when I've finished. And this was about the experience of emotions in companies. So we were running a huge project and still do on shame and how shame is experienced in different organizations during the fourth industrial revolution. In the next slide, I'm defining shame. So you might know shame as a really negative emotion that impacts quite strongly when you experience it. And in this research and coaching approaches and consultancy, we try to change the negative experience of shame towards making shame a resource for further development of employees and organizations. I'm not going through all of these points right now, but this is the most important aspect here. So we could see, for example, with regard to 4IR organizations and shame, I brought you a little example in the next slide, which shows how one of the employees struggles with shame that was brought to him by his superior. We could see different examples here of shame. For example, the lack of technological knowledge and skills. People are very ashamed about that. They don't know how to handle technology. Or shameful communication in emails, like, for example, the accusations or verbal violence, or copying other people into emails that are not supposed to read it. That was all part of the experiences shared. But also fear of the younger generations taking over the whole knowledge of the older generations who actually should hold the experience and the knowledge in organizations, but being run over and being ashamed about this by younger generations. Other shame experience that were shared for the fourth industrial revolution context was that people felt they were just too slow for all the rapid change which occurred in the organizations. And also they were ashamed when they lost their jobs in between, then when they lost their jobs, for example, and were replaced by robots, or when they experienced unemployment because of new algorithms being in place and taking over their field of control or field of work. So they were quite ashamed about the technology taking over and they not being able to actively do something with the technology or counteract the technology and stay into their workplace. So there were also experiences with regard to shame due to lifestyles or shame to work remotely as well. And experience shame not being in the workplace anymore, not being able to go out. So one of the employees, for example, shared that he was very ashamed because his superior said he got information about him and his lifestyle. And lifestyle is also meant in a 4IR context here with, for example, gaming or meeting the wrong people. And this information was brought through email communication in an anonymous way. And the superior confronted the employee, and the employee felt very ashamed about this situation, and he felt he has to leave the organization. And instead of working with the shame and transforming it, he left the organization and started his other job. So in the next slide, we share here that remote working can really become a safe space, because he said in the next organization, he was only remote working, and it became actually an important aspect for him. He felt safe. He felt nobody can really impact on his lifestyle anymore. And this kind of safe space can be a good space for him. And it's also part of the 4IR. In the next slide, I'm just resuming that we have to go from a kind of toxic shame that impacts negatively in the organizations to a more positive way of dealing with these emotions, not only shame, but also, for example, fear. That is the most mentioned emotion within organizations of the 4IR at the moment. So people often nowadays use, for example, remote workplaces, but they also use a lot of counseling apps within organizations. And I would like to share in the next slide one intervention that we have developed and we are using, for example, in engineering organizations to work with negative emotions. And we've just launched it a few months ago and worked with it quite extensively, because what we can often see in engineering organizations is that people do not share their emotions, but rather look at the challenges in a more cognitive way. And we found out if people really talk about their emotions, they feel much better afterwards, and the transformation into the 4IR is going much easier. So this is a resource compass for Industry 4.0, and you can choose here, for example, we chose here some primary emotions, for example, joy and anger or disgust. And you can also change it to secondary emotions like shame, for example. And then we put the topics in one of the organization, for example, in the outer circle. For example, people said we need an open and mindfulness approach to the 4IR, but we don't have it because we fear to lose our jobs, and so on. So in organizations, we nowadays use this kind of tool to speak about the emotions and the interventions we need on a behavioral level to change the organizations. The last example I want to share with you is coming in the next slide, and this is about the chocolate factory I've been talking about. And it is about collaborative behavior in a remote working workspace. So when we go to the next slide, we are talking here about a German chocolate factory. It was very nice consulting for them. You can imagine lots of chocolate. It was a German, very traditional, family-orientated production company. And they were expanding rapidly for the expansion of their company in Europe, but also in Asia. And they are the third leading chocolate producer in Europe nowadays, a quite small company that really was very successful. And they had one headquarter in the UK. Now, the people in the UK have completely different chocolate taste than the people in Germany, for example, or in Asia. So there started to be a huge conflict about flavors of chocolate. And you can see in the next slide, that was only the top of the iceberg, because we could see that there are so many different layers of conflicts due to the fourth industrial revolution and in combination with the systems. So a lot of the employees, they were 8 altogether, working and cooperating together in the UK and Germany based. They said they really didn't want to accept that they have to communicate via e-mediated technology. They would prefer to fly in and out the different countries, and they couldn't work properly remotely. And there was a lot of intrapersonal resentment. Then on the interpersonal level, we could see there was a huge reluctance between the German and the UK team to use the technology effectively and to really look at the understanding, what does it mean to be a family enterprise in the German tradition and also in the UK tradition. It's quite different. And then other systemic aspects that were coming into this 4IR transformation were, for example, the Brexit. And we could see the German team didn't really want to invest in the UK anymore because they felt, oh, it's much safer to invest in Asia because there are more people eating our chocolate. They like our flavors more than people in the UK, for example. And we don't know if we not better shift our investment. So in the next slide, we can see that we found some solutions. We got a mediator into this organization with bicultural background, UK and German background, and we had this consultant in for half a year in this organization to mediate the sessions online, but also the sessions face-to-face, and it really increased. We used different techniques. We used, for example, creative techniques like active imagination of Carl Gustav Jung, or different aspects, for example, of work with the organizational interventions and tools like the compass, for example. And also we could see on different levels. We evaluated the cognitive level, the affective level, and also the behavioral level. And we, in the end, developed a step-by-step coaching approach to increase the understanding within the 4IR context and take the fear away to communicate via technology and in this remote intersections. So in the last slide, you can see I'm sharing with you that we have used different approaches from positive psychology. We've looked at the positive, we've looked at the negative, and we really worked through the challenges through exploring the intersectionalities, to looking at the culture. We looked at the family business culture. We looked at the meaning and what does it mean to produce chocolate? Why do people want to do it? What is the meaning for the employees and for the management? What are the virtues in this chocolate company? And what is well-being all about? What does it mean to be well? What are the positive emotions people want to experience in the organization and through e-technology, and where can it be maybe improved, and where can we close really the virtual gap within the organization. We also used interventions with regard to trust building because we could see there is actually a lot of trust missing in between the both teams. And we did some e-interventions and also face-to-face interventions, as I earlier on said, a balanced approach of both. And it was always important to have a resource orientation, but this was only possible after we had worked through the shadow sides of the organization and also the employees. So coming now with the next slide to the reflections and the conclusions of this talk today, I would like to share in the next few slides just my own conclusions, and I hope we can discuss a bit later. And you can see in the next slide now that my aim today was just to look at some selected key factors of the art of collaboration. And as I've mentioned, we've looked at intrapersonal levels, interpersonal levels, group and team levels in the organization, and the expansion through the PP10 approach to PP20, looking at the broader society and having a contribution to the good in humankind. In the next slide, you can see that I've listed once more the cognitive level, because we are going here from just knowledge creation to a mindful and a meta-reflective approach within organizations by creating positive perceptions, but working through the negative. When we are looking at the emotions and the feelings people experience, first of all, it is a challenge already to really open up the emotions, especially when we are looking at engineering companies or companies where we usually do not have the focus on emotions. Then looking at building the connections through the emotional side and transforming the negative emotions which might come up indirectly or directly to positive resources. And further, in terms of behavior, I guess we have really to look at the e-mediated behavior. How do we negotiate online? How do we build up relationships in a positive manner? And how do we really build trust and communication skills that are not only verbal, but also non-verbal? And to really adjust the layers of the systemic approaches and interventions that we can use. In the next slide, you will see that the art of collaboration is really important in terms of increasing awareness and mindfulness, especially in IO psychology, because I believe there is not enough awareness yet with regard to the fourth industrial revolution and the specifics, but also with how to create positive virtual spaces with regard to courage and bridging virtual gaps and creating excitement for the new that is coming towards us. And thereby looking at the fear, but transforming it rather into excitement, building belief and trust in the human connection, and also supporting organizations to build up the structures to really support their employees in a positive way and expand the virtual identities and the work identities and the face-to-face and family identities. In the next slide, we are looking now at the recommendations for research. So when we are looking at IO psychology research, we have to apply our research maybe traditions and look at transcultural spaces and at intersectional spaces. We have to really take systemic approaches, not linear approaches, and open black boxes where we don't know what's inside and what will come out afterwards. And we have to be courageous really to do that. We have to include the systemic perspective and create new spaces beyond the mainstream of fourth industrial revolution. And if we don't do it in the global south, we will end up in a situation where we will take concepts of the global north, which might not necessarily fit our social, cultural, and economic environment. So we can now use both positive psychology approaches actually to change that for a better and in our own interest also in the global south. When we are looking at the recommendations for the practice in the next slide, we can see that also in practice, we work with a huge complexity of different aspects coming into the fourth industrial revolution. often we can see that a lot of organizations are stuck in the third industrial revolution, that they haven't transformed that yet, that they are struggling how to transform and what the 4IR actually is. Looking at the last 2 years of my research, I really found out that a lot of people prepared for interviews, for surveys before, just to having something to say what in their opinion is the fourth industrial revolution. But we need also new e-tools, new face-to-face tools to really implement new interventions with regard to the 4IR and help employees and organizations to collaborate successfully. Finally, there are also recommendations in the last slide for industrial and organizational psychologists. And I believe that we have really got a bigger role to play than we are doing at the moment. We have to create a stronger awareness with regard to the IO psychology's role from a positive psychology perspective. We can give practical guidance, and often we are not yet enough maybe in the field to do that. On a regional, provincial, or even global level. We can really fill the spaces with new models of IO psychology and practical implications and develop an approach that is cognitive, affective, and behavioral, and really have complex thinking patterns and bring them also to our students with regard to the systemic inclusiveness. So this is the input from my side with regard to the topic of the art of the fourth industrial revolution. And I would love to get into a discussion with you now. And on my last slide, you can see, because tomorrow in South Africa is a very special day. It's the Nelson Mandela Day. And it always seems impossible until it is done. And I think that is also true for the fourth industrial revolution, because we are creating it at the moment, and we as IO psychologists should have a say, and we as people from the global south should also have a say in that and contribute to it meaningfully and successfully. So the floor is open now for a discussion, and I thank you very much for staying on board of this talk, and I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Claude, for a very exhaustive presentation, and it was nice listening to you after so long. And now the session is open for questions, and some questions have already arrived in the chat box. So we will take them first, and then we'll move for, we may ask for some other questions. And I request other participants, if they have some queries, that they may write in the chat box, and I can one by one take this queries and ask Claude to explain. So Claude, the first question is by one of my colleagues from another university, which is in Gaya. You know the place Buddha got his enlightenment. There is a university in Gaya, and he's working as an assistant professor there in Department of Psychology. So he has asked that COVID-19 have already created an uncertain future and environment for small as well as large organizations. So how this will impact future collaborations among small organizations? Then is there any positives to take from this uncertainty for organizations?
Okay, good. Thank you very much for this question. Yes, okay, we are all in a very difficult global situation at the moment that has created a huge change and uncertainty, that is for sure. And how it really will impact on future collaborations, nobody can, I think, at the moment really say. However, what we can see in a lot of research at the moment, and there was a lot of research just being done online in many parts of the world at the moment, we can see that it created for a lot of people negative emotions, uncertainty, fear, on the one hand, but on the other hand, also it stimulated a lot of rethinking of lifestyles. It created a lot of looking at what is meaningful in life on a personal level, but also on an organizational level. When we are looking at the different countries, and I think we can really see different aspects within different countries and what it actually does. But for example, when you're looking at the Netherlands, and at organizations in Amsterdam, for example, they are now, based on COVID, trying to recreate their whole politics towards a sustainable, ecological city and expanding it in the entire country. So that would be, for example, for me, a positive effect of COVID-19 and the difficulties. At the same time, we have to look, I think, very closely at the situation. We have to look closely at governments, what they are doing, and also look at organizations and see what we can take out of it. I think positive aspects that occurred is a bigger focus or a larger focus on mental health and well-being, how to reduce stress, how to work meaningful in remote workplaces, to also update remote workplaces and to look what can really be positive working online and through e-mediated technology. I think there's a huge shift towards it, but at the other hand, it has also got a large danger. But I think we have to find in the end a balance based on what we decide, what we really want from the world and in the world, and do that on a global level to sustain the world. And I think it's a moment in history of humankind where we can hold our breath and take in a deep breath, actually, and think about our being here. And this would be a positive aspect, in my opinion. However, I mean, it is up for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Claudia, for nicely explaining Nursing Kumar's questions. Another question is from Stephen. He has asked, what would be the best business model for organizations to operate or run their businesses post-COVID?
Oh, that's a big question, I must say. I'm not even sure if there is a best practice business model. It depends on the industry you work in. But I believe that it is always good to work through the challenges in a mindful way and then take the positive out of the situation. However, with regard to post-COVID, it is really difficult to say. We've seen different research coming up now, how devastating the economy will be globally. And I think I have to be a bit humble here and say, I can't really answer this question, what the best business model will be, because it's a highly complex situation that goes beyond my own mind as well.
Thank you. And another question is from Prarthana Saikia. So, ma'am, where do you see affective intelligence along with the cold cognition in the fourth industrial revolution?
Yeah, you know what I've been hearing a lot, because I've been consulting a lot online, and a lot of people complain they don't feel any positive or emotional connection to, for example, their colleagues, to other employees in the organization or their collaborators. However, my answer to that is, you know, the connection, as long as you yourself have got a connection to your own insight and to your own emotions, and you are self-aware of these emotions and your emotional intelligence which lies within yourself, it is very, very easy to connect through technology to others. And I believe if each and every one of us could have even a little bit closer connection to our own emotions, we will make the world a warmer place and a warmer cognitive place as well.
Okay. Thank you, Claudia. And next question we have from Neeraj Pawar. Professor, you spoke about engineering companies. How much impact this COVID situation will have on manufacturing industries?
Yes, I mean, it has got a huge impact economically, but also how people work. We can see it delays a lot of processes at the moment. We can see a lot of slowdown in production, in manufacturing. We can see there is a global stop of finances flow. There is also a slowing down in investments all over the world. We can see that in the engineering field. Customers do not buy as much as they used to buy, and everybody is a bit on hold, and this will create somehow a deepening of the challenges for the moment. However, I think it is also time to reflect if this is really what the world needs, more production, or do we need and manufacturing, or do we maybe need something else? Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Claudia. So I think all questions which were asked by the attendees, we have covered. One more we have got from Badil Ahmad. Respected organizers and esteemed professor, I am student of psychology. My brief question is, what does positive psychology suggest for the people trying to raise their position through a small scale organizations, even living in the conflict of ideas and happenings?
Okay. If I get the question right, the question is, how can positive psychology...
What does positive psychology...
how can positive psychology help to raise within, to rise or raise their position within organizations? I believe there are different aspects to it. If you've got a critical view on the one side, often critical views and dealing with challenges help to stimulate creativity and innovation. And that is really needed in COVID times and also in the fourth industrial revolution, on the one hand. However, often this is done in a very critical way in many societies. And at the same time, positive psychology can help when we are looking at the challenges in organization, also look at the positive side and work through this, what is really difficult, towards the positive. And this can help you to also raise with regard to your positions, because often in organization, we see an imbalance. Either there's a balance to looking rather at the negative or rather at the positive. And when you're raising or rising up in organizations with your position, it's always good to look at the balanced point of view and stabilize also the organization or the colleagues and employees to look at both of the sides and bring in both of the perspectives and balance it out. And I believe that can help also for you to stand your point and your viewpoint within an organization.
So thank you, Claudia, for taking so many questions from the our audience. So once again, we are very much thankful to you for taking your time out from your schedule and speaking on this platform of the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology. And I hope we could invite you to our next Congress, which we have scheduled in October. But let us see what this. Maybe we may have to shift to the online platform for organizing the next Congress. So maybe in that we will be meeting in this manner only.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sandeep, for the invite. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. So in the last, I request Soumya to present vote of thanks to our renowned speaker, Claude. Soumya, are you there?
Yes. A very good evening, everyone. It is my privilege today to propose a vote of thanks on today's session of Udyog Care Talks. My heartfelt thanks goes out to Professor Claude Helen for her informative and enriching lecture on the art of collaboration, role of positive psychology in transforming organizations towards the fourth industrial revolution. Since Professor Mayer has extensive experience as a professor and researcher and is an innovator with the research area of fourth industrial revolution, her inputs today have been invaluable. As Professor Mayer said in her lecture, the fourth revolution is a way of blurring boundaries between the physical, digital, and biological worlds with rapid change, mediated by smart technology and newly occurring lifestyles. However, such a big change requires adjustments of layers and exploration of interventions, which can be brought about through the judicial use of positive psychology approaches. So, thank you very much, Professor Mayer, for taking time out of your busy schedule to address us all today. I would also like to thank the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology, Varanasi, and Dr. Sandeep Kumar for organizing this wonderful session on a very interesting topic. Last but not the least, my special thanks goes out to all the participants today for your gracious virtual presence. Your active participance is what made this session successful. So, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
So, once again, thanks to all the participants. Thanks to Cloudy, and I hope in future we'll be continuing this interaction, and hope we will be collaborating for the researches as well.